Hey guys, welcome back to Roman History Part 2. And this time we're actually going to be taking a closer look at the Roman Empire. So, moving on from our first part, Julius Caesar is now dead. He was assassinated by senators for being too powerful. Now, following Caesar's death, another small civil war breaks out. And again, just like as before, now is a good opportunity for someone else to step up and take control of the situation. Here we have Caesar's adopted son by the name of Octavian. So Octavian joins forces with an experienced general by the name of Mark Antony and a powerful politician named Lepidus. In 43 BC, they took control of Rome as the Second Triumvirate, just as Julius Caesar, his predecessor, his father, Crassus and Pompey did at an earlier date. So Octavian forces Lepidus to retire, and while fighting in Anatolia, Mark Antony had met Queen Cleopatra of Egypt. Keep in mind that Queen Cleopatra had actually gained her throne under the power of Julius Caesar. These two had fell in love, and Mark Antony follows her back to Egypt. So Octavian accuses Antony of plotting to take control of Rome, because now he has an Egyptian army under his command. And Octavian decides to take care of the situation, and he defeats the combined forces of Antony and the Egyptian army under Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. And at the end of the war, Antony and Cleopatra both commit suicide. So Octavian now is completely unchallenged, and he is the unchallenged ruler of Rome, and he accepts the title of Augustus. And Augustus in Latin stands for the Exalted One. So he becomes the first emperor of Rome. So this is the beginning of it, but during the time from about 27 BC to about 180 AD, this is when Rome was at the peak of its power. And it all starts under Augustus Octavian, under his rule. So for this gap of about 207 years, we have this peace that reigned throughout the empire, except for a few fighting tribes along some of the distant borders of the Roman Empire. This period of peace is known as the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. During this time, Rome was actually glorified with stunning public buildings, a stabilized frontier, besides a few fighting tribes occasionally that would rear up. They would also set up a postal system, which allowed for long-distance trading to occur. And they also allowed the plebeians, which were the majority of the population, the kind of lower class, to serve in government. So this was a big step. Now you have not only just the wealthy landowners, but you also now have everybody that can run for a position in the government, say in the Senate. So here's a depiction of the Roman Empire around the end of Pax Romana, right? The Roman peace. So this is kind of the extent to which the Roman Empire spreads. You can tell here all the areas in purple. Obviously, we have the main portion of Italy, which by the end of the Roman Republic, they had control of Italy, Sicily, the areas around Carthage, parts of Spain, as well as parts of Greece and the coastline along here. So as the Roman Empire continues, right, it continues its expanse over into Anatolia, modern day Turkey, down the eastern Mediterranean, down into Egypt, which Octavius or Augustus, takes after his defeat over Mark Antony and Cleopatra, as well as the coastline of North Africa, and even extending up into Britannia, or the modern day Britain. So in the Roman world, we have a few things that come up that we certainly need to talk about, and one is agriculture. So this is the most important industry in the empire. Obviously, you want to keep your people happy. You need to make sure that they have food. So other food and luxury items were acquired through trade. And again, the Roman Empire was great at trading and moving things long distances. One of those things that they moved around quite a bit were silver coins. So they came up with their own currency. They had created these to use throughout the empire with trading to make that much easier. And the trade extended all the way through some older Silk Roads to China and even India and China. So talking about roads, right? That was one thing that the Romans were great at, was developing this very complex system of roads that linked the entire empire. So that reached out into places such as Persia and Russia and even the Far East, as we had just mentioned. So originally, these roads were built by Roman armies for military purposes as they expanded the empire. But once those areas were integrated into the Roman civilization, into the Roman Empire, then they could be used for trading purposes. So looking at the Roman society, most people in the Roman Empire lived in the countryside, outside of Rome, even though they were part of the Roman Empire. And a lot of them worked on farms. So obviously you have a very vast empire. You need to make sure that it has enough food to feed all of the people. So there were a lot of farmers. In Rome and in other smaller cities, you have merchants, soldiers, slaves, foreigners, philosophers, all shared these crowded, noisy streets. So you can imagine the amount of cultural mixture that you're witnessing in an area like Rome. Here, people from all walks of life had come together to create this uh, very diverse society. Talking about slavery just a bit, slavery in the Roman world. Slavery was a significant part of Roman life. It was widespread and important to the society. And the numbers may have actually reached as high as 1/3 of the total population. So there were actually quite a few slaves throughout the Roman Empire. Now, most of these slaves were actually conquered from peoples from anywhere outside of the Roman Empire. So one example of this earlier on, when we were talking about the Punic Wars, the Carthaginians had fell to the Roman Empire, and a lot of the inhabitants of Carthage were taken away and sold into slavery. So slaves were bought and sold, and the children of slaves would even become slaves. So there was really it was difficult to get out of that status. They could be punished, they could be rewarded, they could be set free, they could even be put to death as their owners saw fit. So it was the owner's decision how your life was. Some slaves were actually forced to become gladiators or professional fighters who fought to death in public contests. And we see the evidence of this now when we look at the Roman Colosseum in the center of Rome. Here are some depictions of gladiators. So here on the left, we see a couple of gentlemen fighting out. I'm not sure about this gentleman behind them, if he's kind of refereeing the fight, if he's part of it. It could be a depiction of a nobleman or even an emperor that is maybe telling them what to do. Who knows? But This is that depiction of a few gladiators fighting to the death. On the right, you actually see gladiators that are fighting animals, and this is a very common thing where you would actually see gladiators put up or slaves put out into the arenas with wild animals that were brought from many places across the old world. So lions and tigers and leopards, and the list goes on. Now, when we had talked about Greek mythology, you'll notice one big commonality between the Romans and the Greeks, and it really comes down to um, the Roman system. The Roman religion was very similar to Greek mythology. So the early Romans worshipped what were called noumena, which were divine forces that resided in everything, and the lares, which are guardian spirits for each family. Now, they gave names to these gods and goddesses and honored them through rituals and hoping to gain fortune and also avoid misfortune. So in Rome, the deities were symbols of the state, and citizens were actually expected to honor them from home and in public ceremonies. And we'll actually talk about this a little bit more when we get into Christianity and we start to see the persecution of Christians. So, taking a look at a few of these, right, we have Jupiter, who is the father of gods, of the gods, and the god of the sky. Very much sounds like Zeus in Greek mythology. We have Juno, his wife, goddess of marriage and watched over women, just like Hera in Greek mythology. Minerva, goddess of wisdom and arts and crafts, very much sounding like Athena. Neptune, god of the sea, very similar to Poseidon in Greek mythology. We have Mars, the god of war. In Greek mythology, it was Ares. We have Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. And this would have been Aphrodite in the Greek mythology. And then we also have Pluto, the god of the underworld, which would have been similar to Hades in Greek mythology. So you can see the similarities there. Talking about society and culture just a bit more, in the Roman Empire, wealth and social status were key determining factors in how people lived. So the rich lived very extravagantly with large homes, gardens, slaves, and many luxuries. And most Romans, though, the unsuccessful, the poor, barely had the necessities of life. Many of them were unemployed and relied on daily rations from the state, such as bread, all right, other certain types of food to keep them going. So, in order to keep these the vast majority of poor citizens happy within the Roman Empire, the government actually provided a lot of other things for them. So they provided free races, free games, mock battles that they could enjoy, and also gladiator contests. So they could travel to the Colosseum and watch these gladiators fight to the death, as well as watching chariot races and being involved in all kinds of activities. So during the Pax Romana, another activity slowly emerged. And we're going to talk about this a lot more in depth in the next section. And this is the practice of a new religion known as Christianity. So talking about the chariot races a bit, here's a depiction of some of the chariot races that are occurring. And you can see the Roman emperor sitting up in his throne, watching out over within the Colosseum, everybody enjoying the view. And I will see you in part 3.